what about this breath here? Okay, look at this text. All the while my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils. Job 27, verse 3. We see then that the breath, that is the Spirit of God, is where? In the nostrils. In other words, our breath, our breathing. That is the Spirit of God, the life force, the breath of life, according to the text. So the dust of the earth plus the Spirit, which is the breath of life, equals a living soul. How many creatures, by the way, have the breath of life? Just man? Let's answer that. Genesis 7, verses 21 and 22. The flood came, overwhelmed the dry land, and this is what happened. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, domestic animals, wild animals, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all human beings. Everything in whose nostrils was a breath of life died. So every living creature then has the breath of life. Everything. Domestic animals, birds, swarming creatures, and human beings all have the breath of life. Every living creature has the breath of life. It's not unique to man. Notice this reference from Gerhard Kittel's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Without the breath, there is no life, and the source of life is outside of us. That's the Hebrew word for breath. The word means wind or breath. The source of life is outside of us. Again, in spite of parallels, a distinction remains between spirit and both soul and heart. There is no separate anthropology, nor do we find the concept of becoming a spirit when the body decays. Important statement for us to remember. So the dust plus the Spirit equals, as we said, a living soul. That's what the Bible says. The dust plus the breath of life equals a living soul. It doesn't say that the soul plus the dust equals a living being. It says dust plus the Spirit equals a living soul. What does the Bible teach about the soul? The King James Version uses the word soul 1,600 times, but never once uses the term immortal soul. Wow. Important to remember. Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 4. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall, what? What does it say? It shall die. It says, the soul that sinneth, it shall die. And God says, all souls are mine. In other words, all people are mine. The person who sins shall die. Back to Kittel. The idea of the soul as an essential core is alien to the Old Testament, which posits no antithesis of body and soul. In other words, the Bible does not teach that the soul is separate from the body. In the Bible, the soul never exists independently of the individual, and the word is never used for an inhabitant of the underworld. All right, in the Bible, how many creatures are souls? Now, we're not asking how many creatures have souls, how many creatures are souls? Notice this interesting text, Revelation 16, verse 3. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. What living creatures live in the sea? Fish. Well then, fish are living creatures. They are described as souls or living creatures. In the Bible then, the word soul actually means living creature. It's the archaic Old English, which is now translated as living creature. So the elements of the earth plus the breath of life equals a living creature. That's what the Bible text is actually saying. Now, death is creation in reverse. Here's what the Bible says. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Ecclesiastes 12, verse 7. All right, the dust goes back to the earth, and the spirit, that's the breath, will return to God who gave the breath of life. All right, that's the breath which every living creature has. Okay. When that breath goes forth, what happens to the thoughts? Psalm 146, verses 3 and 4. Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goeth forth, he returneth to his earth. In that very day his thoughts do what? His thoughts perish. Remember we said before, we agree, I think, that the essence of a person is the thoughts, the feelings, the aspirations, the character. What happens to a person's thoughts when they die? His thoughts perish. They don't survive his bodily death. So the elements of the earth minus the breath equals a dead body. Kind of like a light bulb. Look at it this way with this illustration. Okay, so you turn on the light, and therefore you have the glowing lamp. What happens when you unplug it? Well, the light goes out. Take away the breath of life, and there's a dead body. The living know that they shall die, but the dead know not what? Know not anything. The dead don't know anything. They're dead in the grave. Ecclesiastes 9, verse 5. The dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence. Psalm 115, verse 17. So the people that die don't go to heaven. They're not up there praising the Lord. They go where? They go down into silence, the grave. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In the grave, who will give you thanks? Psalm 6, verse 5. All right, what did Jesus have to say about the subject? What did Jesus teach about death and the soul? In Luke 9, verse 25, Jesus said, For what is a man advantaged if he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away? Now the King James says, if he lose his soul. Of course, we recognize that modern language, modern English, would have it translated just as this text does. If he lose himself or be cast away. Kittle has this to say. These sayings omit the references to the Suke in Gehenna or Hades. The emphasis is on the corporeality of the resurrection as distinct from the Hellenistic survival of the soul. So the idea of the soul surviving bodily death is not biblical, it's from Greek Hellenism. Notice the illustration from the story of Lazarus. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. John 11, verses 1 to 4. Well, let's see what happened here. First of all, Jesus said, it's not unto death.